Howdy bubs and welcome back. Today we're going to be jumping back into GameMaker and working on the next portion of our project. We're going to be adding in the camera object and implementing screen shape. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into our project. Where we last left off, we had just gotten the weapon and projectile set up, but let's add a new object that we're going to be dealing with. Jump over into objects. We're going to create a brand new object. This object is going to be our camera object. It's very important. It is relevant for all of our operations. We will need this to keep track of our player or whatever we're trying to focus at the moment. So I'm just going to call this OCamera. We're going to have two events, a create event and a step event. Let me increase the size of this for everyone to see. Scale this up. Okay. So in here we're of course going to set up the camera. A couple of basic information. What camera are we using? That's actually important before we can actually get this to properly work. Let's head back over into our room. So if we drop down over here on the side and take a look at a couple of our properties, we do need to make sure our viewport is enabled. And specifically viewport 0, I want to make this visible. As you can see right now, my room is not that big. In order to actually make use of our camera and everything, I want to actually make my room bigger. So I'm going to increase this to, let's say 2048. And I'll just keep the size. Maybe I'll make it a little bigger. I'll make this 1024. So now our camera is much smaller than the full room size. I want to make sure that this follows along nicely. Let me go back to the instance layer. I'm going to actually reorganize portions of this. So we've got all of these items, the walls and the player. I'm going to actually split this up to make this cleaner. Sorry, not a tile layer. We need to create an instance layer. This instance layer, this will be our walls, and this will be player. We'll move our walls layer to the bottom. And now in my walls layer, I'm going to go ahead and grab my walls and quickly build. Like, there we go. We've got a nice little map set up. We'll see what happens. Now that we have a new map that I very quickly built up, we have our camera properly set with the viewport enabled and viewport 0 visible. Let's now return back to our object in the create event. And here we're going to have our camera set to be equal to our view camera and 0. This will grab viewport 0. Then what are we going to be following? So I'm going to make a special or a variable to keep track of our O player. We should only have one player at a time, so this will be fine. Now normally you can use the built-in features that you can find in the room to follow a player around, but I want to do a couple of extra things that makes it easier if we just have a camera object that handles this ourselves so we have full control of it. So view width half. What is half of our view width? So let's get the camera, get view width, and we're going to be grabbing this camera and divide it by 2. We're going to view height half, camera view height, and divide that by 2. Then, where are we going? X start, Y2 is equal to Y start. So, a couple of necessary variables so that way we can keep track of where we're going, how it's moving, and play around with getting the simulation of how the camera operates. Going over into our step, let's go ahead and update some of this so that way we can have updates to camera position. So update the destination. So if our instance exists, this will be of course relevant in case somehow we have an issue where our instance doesn't exist in a moment. Let's not mess up our camera. If our instance exists, our x2 is going to be following our thing that we follow, in this case, our player. So long as we have a player, we're going to follow the player's x value. Our y2 will also be set to follow the player's y value. So now we're chasing down this item. Then moving down below, we need to then update object position. Our x value is going to be plus equals where we're trying to go to minus our x value divided by 25. Our y value is similarly going to be plus equals where we're trying to go to minus the current y value divided by 25. What this does is it slowly moves us towards our item based off of the distance between the points. If we are further away, it moves us faster. If we are closer, the camera slowly keeps up with it. This gives us a sensation that the camera is trying to keep pace with the player. The faster the player moves, the faster the camera will follow along. Now that we have this, let's remember to throw this item into our room. Actually, let me make sure this is in. I'll throw this with the player. Run this, and now the camera should, there we go, it's following us around. We've got everything working out well. But there is one slight issue. If you notice with here, our world, this portion and this portion are being seen and they are a black field. To make it clear that that's going on, I'm going to set my background to be a very, there we go, it's gray now. This color, whatever this is. If we now run it, we see that the rest of the background just tries to match that. It's not really an issue right now, but depending on what you're trying to do, if you have a specific sprite or something rather than just a blank background, this may not be the situation that you want for your game. So what we can do to address that is, instead of just having our camera simply update and chase us around, we need to add some mechanism to ensure that it avoid moving the camera outside the room. This both works for left, right, up, and down. So our x value is going to be clamp. It's going to make sure it stays within the bounds of view w half room width minus view w half. Yes. And then our y value, we're going to clamp our y value to be forced between half of our view for the height and half of our view minus room height. This will trap us inside the scope, so that way we cannot see outside our room, as we see here. I go down below. It only shows a certain amount. I get to the edge of my little arena. It clamps it and prevents it from leaving our view. Now that we have this, we have a fully functional little camera that follows around our player and doesn't have any issues. The next portion that we're going to be doing is adding in screen shake. How do we make sure that the screen shakes when certain events occur? Something simple such as firing my crossbow, I would like to have a small little shake effect that occurs whenever this gets launched. Well, that will involve us going over into our scripts and adding a little bit of code there and updating our camera. We'll make a new function, screen shake, and this will cover magnitude, how much the screen will shake, and frames, how long it will shake. With our object, our camera object, we then need to specify a couple of things. If our magnitude is greater than how much shake we have remaining, then I want my shake magnitude to be set equal to our magnitude. If our shake remain is equal to, updated to our magnitude, and our shake length is equal to frames. So, shake magnitude, shake remain, spelled this wrong, magnitude, semicolon, there we go. Shake remain and shake length. Now, what are these three variables? They're of course being complained about. This one only exists within the scope of here, so it's kind of redundant. But we're going to update our code above to include this. What this does is, with our camera, if a new shake is bigger than the last, which means if nothing is shaking, it is of course bigger than before. Or if we have multiple shakes happening, the bigger shake gets priority. We then specify this is how much we shake, this is how much shake remains, and this is how long we need to shake for. This is how we'll keep track of that. Now with this saved, we can then move back up to our code and update a couple of things in our create event. We of course need to set our initial shake length, which is of course 0. That's the number of frames we're going to be shaking. Our shake magnitude is equal to 0. This is pixels of movement. Our shake remaining, this will be remaining pixels to move. And finally our shake buffer, set it at 32. Prevent camera from moving outside of room. So all of these are being used except for, right now, our shake buffer, because it sees them over here. Now, in our step event, we of course need to update a little bit of our movement outside of our rooms. We need to add in our shake buffer here, shake underscore buffer, to our first half, and then subtract it in our second half. Let me move this over. In this case, subtracting our shake buffer. So now we ensure that if we are shaking, the buffer catches it and makes sure we don't shake beyond that point. Then we actually need to include the shake effect. Shaking. this little bit will address our x value gets slightly modified by a random amount within the scope of negative shake remaining and positive shake remaining. We do the exact same thing for y. Then our shake remain is going to be equal to the maximum value between 0 and shake underscore remain minus 1, no, minus, one more bracket, 1 divided by our shake length times our current shake magnitude. Shake underscore magnitude, close that off there, yes, there we go. And so we either get the larger number, 0, or whatever shake remain has, starting with whatever our value is and decreasing it. 1 divided by our length times our magnitude, so that way it slowly brings itself down to nothing, rather than just simply 1 less each time. But right now we don't have anything happening. Our shake code is present. Everything runs just fine whenever we run the program, but the shake code is not active because we need to actually add it somewhere. Going into my OWeapon, in our begin step, whenever I fire a projectile, I'm going to go ahead and shake the screen. Screen shake, and I specify, you see our scripts now specify down here some details. Magnitude, how much do I want to shake the screen? 10 pixels in range. How long do I want to shake it? 10 frames. Let's try that out. We can now run this. We see a very slight shake going on over here. And it essentially, it feels like it's shaking the world, but in reality we're just shaking the camera a bit. But it gives us a nice little sensation like something's happening, a little bit of feedback. Those kinds of elements are always fun and enjoyable to the user. But that's all we have for today. This will wrap up this bit. We now have included a camera object with our create event. This addresses setting up our camera and handling our shaking components. We have our step event that goes through the whole process of making sure that we have the destination, we update our position, we avoid viewing outside the room, we have everything shake, and we update the camera position based off of all of the modifications, if any, that occurred. Then we have our shake script, screen shake. We pass in the magnitude, how much it's going to shake, for how long it's going to shake the frames. Then we just reference our camera. If our magnitude is greater than whatever we are currently shaking, if any, update everything, and so that way the camera can proceed and use all of these variables correctly as it cycles through and modifies the camera position. If you have any questions with this, just let me know in class. Otherwise, that's all we've got. Everyone, have a good one.